Shavua Tov, and welcome back to Sephardic U Presents. I'm Nathaniel Poole here with my co-host Sam Bendayan, and we're excited to be back after the long Passover break with a fresh episode exploring this week's Parashat Acharei. Today we'll open up the discussion with our live Sephardic U community as we do every Sunday morning following our group Torah reading. So grab your coffee, your chumash, and let's jump in. Parashat Acharei picks up after the tragic death of Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, and dives into some of the most sacred and sensitive topics in the Torah, including the Yom Kippur service, laws around entering the Holy of Holies, and the concept of ritual purity. And we'll look at what it means to live within boundaries and why holiness is sometimes means distance, and how these ancient rituals still whisper truth into our modern lives. Sam, do you want to start us off?
Absolutely. Thank you, Nathaniel. So right from the beginning of the parasha, there's this wait. Acharei mot shne bnei Aaron, after the death of the two sons of Aaron. And immediately Hashem tells Moses to warn Aaron not to come into the Holy of Holies just anytime he wants to. And this sets the tone. Even the high priest, the holiest person, has limits. He can only enter the holiest space in the world once a year on Yom Kippur, and even then, only after intense preparation. So what's going on here? Why so many restrictions? It's like Hashem is saying that intimacy with him is possible, but it's not casual.
Yeah, I think this touches on something so deep, too, that proximity to holiness requires preparation. You don't just jump into it. Just like we don't just barge into someone's home uninvited, we don't approach the divine or God without readiness. So let's open this up. What do you all think? How do you relate to this idea of sacred boundaries today? Is there a modern equivalent? And Sam, if you want to translate, since we have some Spanish speakers here, just translate the question and let's get it going.
Sí, la pregunta es que la santidad parece que conlleva distancia. O sea, la santidad, cuando uno se acerca a Dios, es algo que no es casual, es algo, no es fácil. Hay que prepararse y solamente hay ciertos momentos donde es posible. Entonces, ¿por qué es así? ¿Y qué es lo que hacen todo el mundo, qué es lo que hacen ustedes en sus propias vidas al respecto? Esa fue la pregunta.
Thank you. So how do we relate to this idea of sacred boundaries today? Is there a modern equivalent?
Yeah,
I can see one that's going on right now with the Catholic Church, right? With the conclave. That's happening right now in real time. And look at the procedures and the buildup to picking a new pope. So, but let's switch this back to Judaism.
Yeah. Though I think what's really relevant in this is the absence of this in our lives, right? A contemporary culture in the last maybe 30 or 40 years has broken down a lot of these barriers. And look what has happened as a result, right? Later on in the parasha, for example, we read about forbidden relationships. And of course, all that's been torn down now and everybody just can do whatever they want. And what happens is it takes away the special moments of life. It takes away things that are interesting. Everything just becomes like drab and unimportant. So it seems like this preparation is what makes things special, is what makes something interesting, mysterious, special.
It adds a formality, right, which is a buildup. Sam, can you bump up your microphone volume?
Sure. So I think that there's also something interesting here with the, we're talking about the distances, holiness can mean distance. And we see that the violation is punishable even by death in some cases. And uh, we've talked about this in prior podcasts, but for those who haven't heard it, there is a theory, there's an interesting theory that the Ark of the Covenant that was inside the tent, so when Aaron went in once a year, he would be standing in front of the Ark. And there's a theory that the Ark of the Covenant had there was physical danger there. There was actually there's this theory stating that it had some kind of radiation emanating from it. And in this parasha offers the strongest evidence for that because it directly says, actually, it's right there on the screen in the middle. There is a special incense that was very specific in its formula. And Aaron had to come in with 2 handfuls of this incense, put it on the fire, and it says that the cloud needs to cover the ark, and unless it covers the ark, he will die. And so the theory is that the incense somehow neutralizes the radiation coming out, and the person who doesn't do that will actually be burned by the radiation, as were the 2 sons of Aaron and other people in the Torah as well in different.
This is that same incense we're prohibited from recreating today, right?
Correct.
11 ingredients, I think. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I see this lack of formality as well. Anybody, please jump in as well. But I've seen it
Can
in
I
our
jump in?
Hold on
Can
one
I-
second,
can I ask-
Ruth. I see it as in our current lives over the last 20, 30 years, the lack of formality. TV dinners, so there's no dinner, there's no preparation for dinner. Now we have social media that's made communication instantaneous rather than thinking about what you're saying, tearing up that letter. No, it was too harsh. No, I'm not going to send it. Yes. Now it's blurting. So there's no preparation. We've become an instant gratification society.
Right.
Sorry, Ruth, you started saying something.
I wanted to go off on a tangent about incense actually, because I've noticed it in a few parashot where they're talking about sacrifice and things like that.
Okay.
We often think about in the modern day, we abhor the whole idea of killing animals for sacrifice, and that's the kind of the whole modern trend of reform liberal Judaism that, oh, this is terrible, we don't want the temple back because we don't want to kill animals, as if we were vegetarian, which we're obviously not. But we somehow sort of overlook the importance of the sacrifice of the bread and the sacrifice of the oil and of very especially of the incense. And I wondered what other people thought of that whole side of it, of the incense.
Great.
We're kind of into that subject, so
You mean
looking at the time to come and whether incense is going to make a comeback.
I think it's a great observation. Sam, you want to?
I mean, these kinds of things, these specific rituals, I don't get too much into them because they're very specific, and many times we don't even know the reasons behind them. Yet we're given the commandments and we're kind of left to figure it out on our own. So I think it's interesting to figure it out on our own, but as to what's going to happen in the future, I'm a little reticent to go there because in the past, a lot of people have put way too much focus on the physical part of it, and they kind of run down that route. And I think it's much more interesting and relevant to look at the philosophy of it and figure out how we can, in our own lives, do what we need to do in order to bring about the salvation. And a lot of things, people talk about the Mashiach. Is he here? Who is he? To me, that's God's business. When the Mashiach reveals himself, we're all going to know. Trust me. Okay, so that's his business. Whoever it is, if he's here, if he's not here, we have things that we need to do, and we should just do them. And then all these other rituals that are going to come in, I really don't know the answers to a lot of these questions. So I don't know if somebody else is more
Well,
learned on this.
In
Sam,
answer,
I'd like to address it first. I don't agree with you on that. I think
Okay.
that all these steps and items are part of the formality of getting closer. And I think it's because we stray too far or we don't follow and we're impulsive by human nature that this is a guideline. Here's the step by step by step that you're going to take. And it, as a result, it puts you in the frame of mind of that holiness or that approach to divinity or approach to God or approach even going into the tent of meeting. It's preparing for that.
Yes,
Mashiach and
so
that, yes, I agree with you.
that's right. I agree with you to a certain extent, but I think that when we do things, it's important to know why we're doing them. It's extremely important.
Yeah.
At least for me, it is. I can't do something if I don't know why I'm doing it. And
not,
so, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I said not always. That is the hukim. The hook is you are going to follow without understanding. It was to get us in that mood of obedience,
blind
blind
faith.
obedience to God. Hok literally was to grave a stone. So there are things like the kashrut that we don't understand, things that it was really a test of faith. And to come back to Ruth, her question about the incense, according to Pirkei Avot, it was, they say, because thanks to the incense, there was never a mosquito or a bug, and there was no woman who ever miscarried.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
That
yes.
is what it is in Pirkei Avot,
Pirkei
that it
Avot,
says
yeah.
that was the reason for the incense. And, to have all this blood, this sacrificial, it must have been overpowering. So
Yeah.
I think this incense was overcoming and putting, like today we have the aromatherapy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It has become a
That's a good
big
point.
thing to have these aromas, to have those incense, to have those oils. The Torah already knew that.
Baruch Hashem.
Right. And
Yes.
there's something I wanted to say about the hukim, about doing things that we don't understand. I believe there is a place for that for sure, because if you notice in real life, if a doctor tells you do A, B, and C,
Mhm.
and it's good advice and it's real advice, you don't necessarily have to know why for it to benefit you. You do it
True.
and it'll benefit you even if you don't know why.
Sure.
So there's definitely a place for that. The issue is trust. Can you trust the person giving you the advice? That's where I have a problem. That's why I need to know the why of everything, because then I know that I'm stepping on a certain ground. But assuming that there is no evil intentions or people are not lying and they're not doing business and trying to make money off of you and all this other stuff, yes, there is definitely an aspect of life in which if you do something, whether you know it why or not, it's going to benefit you.
Correct.
Yeah. And I like to share a comment. Just kind of
Absolutely,
combining
Rafa.
the two. Thank you. Just combining the two questions. You asked first, Nathaniel, about the ritual and actually taking the weight of Hashem and not being so casual. I know I know the main explanation that people get for, let's say, Netilat Yadayim is about the Ruach and the hands and stuff like that. And, it seems to the modern mind superstitious. But when you read the Yerushalmi, they talk about, it's about cleanliness, it's about being orderly and things like that. And the Halabi sages, the Syrian sages, they talk about it in a way that's not so spiritual, and they say, we wash. The first thing we get up, we wash. We say our prayers because we were preparing to meet the King. And if you go like a strictly Rambam, he talks about that. When you get up to pray, you should even dress a certain type of way because you're meeting the King. So
Mhm.
I would say there's a traditional trail of thought about Netzach Yadayim and the morning rituals all before Shacharit to prepare yourself to meet the king and to prepare yourself to do other mitzvot. And even, the Lavi sages, they say, when you go to do Netzach Yadayim, you should cover your feet, because anytime you go to do a mitzvah, you should, cover your feet. They don't even, eat the dinner tables or do what is it called? Kiddush without, covering their feet, for instance. So, there are some cultures, communities, some explanations about, some of the rituals we do that have been passed down by the sages that prepare us to do mitzvot, prepare us to do, the prayers, because they embody the idea of these are our mikrot, these are our meeting with Hashem.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent, Rafa.
Beautiful.
And also, to appease Sam with his need for the scientific facts, there's scientific studies done that this washing of hands also prevented the Jews from being destroyed in the Black Plague.
Correct.
And these rituals help preserve us. So it also backfired on us because we're the only ones not dying. So then they thought we were witches and went after us.
Poison wells and stuff.
But
before we go on, Jonathan posted something very, very interesting in the chat. Jonathan, instead of posting it, you want to verbalize it?
Oh, I think
it's along the lines of what Ruth was talking about with the incense. So it's interesting from coming from Mexico, where Jonathan's from, their traditions.
Yep. Some of these traditions in Mexican medicine, we can, as we more study with the original indigenous people, we believe that we have a lot of common things, or maybe like the same, because of the when we make this kind of cleanness in Mexican medicine, we studied that this kind of formula has the ability to kill viruses and parasites. So I believe that the original Ketoret formula maybe can kill the viruses and all kind of I don't know how to say in English, pathogenos.
Pathogens.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
That. So I believe that Ketoret formula it's a real energetic.
It's a real thing.
Yeah, energetic and physical and non-physical formula that might be can kill that kind of evil things.
Yeah,
that is correct, because in Pirkei Avot it says there were never a mosquito and no woman ever miscarried.
Yeah, from the scent, right?
So who knows? It is, that may very well be what Jonathan is saying.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that whenever there's blood, the first thing you see is mosquitoes and flies everywhere. And
True.
Yeah, the sun was full of blood, and yet there was never a disease or flies or anything like that.
It was also talking about there wasn't a smell.
Correct.
In spite of the sacrifice, there was no bad smell that you would expect to associate with it.
Exactly.
That was in Pirkei Avot, as I recall.
Right.
And they speak about cinnamon, and cinnamon until today kills a lot of bacteria and viruses. The cinnamon, there is maybe even marijuana in one translation. It says it was actually marijuana. Who knows?
Yeah,
wow.
I've heard that. Yeah, that's come up with a couple of times.
Well, we have medicinal marijuana.
If you can mix marijuana and peyote in Mexican traditional medicine, and it helps to in several cases of I don't know, head issues like thrombosis. I don't know how to say in
Yeah,
Wow.
Thrombosis.
thrombosis, same thing.
Wow.
yeah,
It's
and it
amazing.
can helps even when the in several cases of madness and all kind of that head issues. I don't know how to say that
Mental issues, you mean? Yeah.
mental issues. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Wow, wow, wow,
Well, look
wow.
at you're talking about old civilizations, the Aztec and Mayans, the Mexican and Central American, South American, but also these holistic things. How about Chinese medicine pushing on 10,000 years of research versus, modern medicine. So I like all this holistic
Yeah,
medicinal talk as well. It's very interesting and very relevant.
Yeah,
So
I actually use quite a bit of it in my own life, and it's helped me
Do you
significantly.
think we're going back a full circle though to the whole idea of boundaries and appropriateness, and that things which are used in this way in traditional medicine and in traditional spirituality were within the bounds of a practitioner of some kind, whether they were religious or with passed down knowledge, and within the bounds of a system. And the thing that people go wrong with in the present day is that they are always doing things without boundaries and without reasons, or with the reasons which are just associated with pleasure rather than
Yeah,
with
yeah. I mean,
more
I
deeper
think
reasoning.
yeah, it's obvious in some cases. For example, with the sexual prohibitions, we see something interesting. Disease, or sorry, the sexual act is very much tied in with serious diseases, right? If you do certain practices, sexual in nature, you can get some very serious diseases. The whole concept to me is interesting. Why did Hashem create it so that the sexual act and disease are very close together? And you have to be careful. There are certain boundaries you have to observe. You can't just do whatever you want. And if you do, you get a serious disease. Many of them are fatal. So I think that yes, it's absolutely the boundaries do lead, the falling of boundaries do lead to disease. But there's something else I wanted to mention here, which I think is extremely relevant, which I heard from a rabbi that I listened to on YouTube, and it goes something like this. It's a long story, but I'll make it short. Uh, in the 1960s, in the United States, with the sexual revolution, what was it that happened exactly? Right? Before that, we had a very traditional view of family, marriage, sex, things like that. In the 1960s, there was a revolution which said we want free love. What are all these hangups? Why is it such a big deal? Just have fun. It's just fun, right? So it was sex without intimacy, without holiness, without any of these boundaries we're talking about. So now what's happened? If you look especially at our children's generation, I'm actually blown away by this every day. Look at men, boys and girls, their level of interest in each other has dropped. I mean, drastically, drastically. And it's almost as if they're saying, yeah, we had the free love. Okay, It's like
a
no one's
great
interested.
example of that. You know, it's too easy now. It's swipe left, swipe right. Too
And
many
it's like,
choices.
and because of that, it's uninteresting. When I was a kid, we all looked at this like, oh my God, it's a big deal. The certain boys would chase girls. Some of us were too shy. There was all these hang-ups, all these things. Nowadays, it's just like, they're like, meh, whatever. It's not interesting. So it shows you kind of the result. We're seeing the result, 60 years later, but we're seeing it. And it's no longer
There's no
anything special.
sanctity.
Yeah, people don't want, and then of course the worst part of this is that people don't want to have kids because of this. They don't want to
Right.
have families. Now you're talking about the potential decline or end of human civilization. So this is very serious
Mm-hmm.
thing that we have violated, and we
Mm-hmm.
absolutely need to go back to where we were.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, I think we could do a whole podcast on this, but we've got a lot of ground to cover, and we're not even covering the second parasha of the week that we have here.
We
But
could be here for a week. Yeah.
I know one of the things I wanted to touch on is we saw in this the entire Yom Kippur ritual laid out with the two goats, one for God, one Azazel sent into the wilderness. And that image of sending away the sins of the people, it's dramatic, it's
Mm-hmm.
symbolic, because it speaks to how seriously the Torah takes the process of what? Atonement.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you read the traditional text that talk about, the goat. Sometimes the goat would come back. So then, they developed the idea of just pushing it off of a ledge to make sure it doesn't come back.
That's right. That's right. So, go on,
sorry,
Sam.
This is very, very controversial, actually, because Azazel is actually, if you read into some of the traditions and everything, Azazel was one of the angels that committed some atrocious sins on earth, right? And so if you look at the beginning of Genesis, I believe it was Genesis 6, it talks about how there were sons of God who were like married the daughters of man, and they kind of had relations with them, and they had children, and it kind of speaking to a mix of bloodlines between extraterrestrials and humans, and Azazel was one of these, and so this is controversial because why are you making an offering to Azazel, right? Isn't this idolatry? That's what it sounds like. Right?
Maimonides was against this idea because at the moment of purification, we cannot think of such things. It was the whole effect of Yom Kippur was really him, the Kohen Gadol, entering the Holy of Holies. So I think it was elevating, and I don't think that Azazel, many rabbis have gone against Azazel being one of those remnants of this lost civilization. They want to refocus us on monotheism, where God is really the King of Kings.
Yeah.
Right. And I heard an interesting take on this, which is that it's not idolatry. What we're doing is we're actually, they're saying it's a tikkun of the sins caused by Azazel, right? That it's a remedy. We're trying to remedy the sins caused by Azazel. So we're remembering what happened and the sins that were caused, and we're sending the goats to the wilderness. Why to the wilderness? Because and again, a lot of this, there's a lot of speculation here. I'm just throwing it out there just to pique people's interest. But the part of the theory states that Azazel was imprisoned in a wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
So, and imprisoned for a very, 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 very long time, right? And so the sending the goat to the wilderness, this theory states, is kind of some sort of I don't know, some kind of rapprochement of saying, you know what, we need to remove these sins. We need to atone for these sins that you did. And so it's kind of like that type of scenario according to this theory, which I thought was interesting. I'm not sure what to make of it, but
in Bavli, in Berachot, and even in Pesachim, it talks about how the Shedim live in the wilderness. So there's a trail of thought to follow with that, even in Bavli. I mean, but I think in Bavli they specifically mention that Azazel is a place. And I think that's really the promoted tradition in the Talmud. But you're right, like the Enochian tradition, gives character to Azazel, and even Yachad and the Dead Sea community. They talk about Azazel as a angelic personality as well.
I think the Parasha of Noah was putting to rest all these ancient beliefs. That is why we start anew. It's a new world, a new human condition. They didn't want us to go back to those legends of the primeval times.
Yeah.
And that is why I think Azazel, bringing Azazel as a demon or something, when we are, it is the holiest of day where the Kohen Gadol is going to enter for that one time.
Mm-hmm.
That it is too impressionable a ceremony for us to be brought down to that superstitions that God wanted to do away with the end of that generation by starting a new world with Noah. There was those waters that are cleansing. The flood of Noah is a cleansing water to cleanse us spiritually.
Yeah, and many of these things I mentioned say that it was actually the sexual mixing of the aliens and the humans which prompted the not the flood. The flood was a natural event that was happening anyway, but it prompted them to not protect the humans and to just let everything get washed out. And then Noah was the only one left.
Yep.
So yeah, it had a major role to play in that.
And then
in that
this parasha is about not just about cleanliness, but spiritual cleanliness. It's not about the soap and water. It's about aligning our lives to holiness.
Mm-hmm.
And the following parasha is Kedoshim. It is another stop after
which
we
is
have
holy.
died. After a Harat Mot and we have died, we start again a new beginning with Kedoshim. The whole parasha is going to be about being holy.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to. This is one of my favorite of the parasha because when it talks about the arayot, the forbidden relations, the astute reader would remember, all the things that we read about, or some things that we read about in Exodus and Shemot, and then also in Bereshit, how the patriarchs like Moshe Rabbeinu, his parents, right? They were a union of nephew and auntie. Yaakov Avinu, he married two sisters, right? And then he married his daughter-in-law, and these are all part of the Arayot. And you imagine that there are many people who are in these forbidden relationships. When Hashem and he's giving these commandments to Moshe Rabbeinu, they're probably looking at each other like, what do we do now? And I think that shows that when the Torah was given, we definitely had to reflect, upon learning the laws and learning our own, iniquities, had to reflect and really dig down deep to be able to put away the past to move on to the future that Hashem, had a vision for us.
Excellent. And Kedoshim, Parashat Kedoshim, which we'll be reading this week, it begins with one of the most powerful lines in the entire Torah, which relates to this. What is it? You shall be holy, for I am holy.
Yeah, and the thing is, we might read these laws and say, wow, this is disgusting to even think of some of these things. But I can assure you, the reason why they gave these laws is because these things were being done, right? Mm-hmm. And we see even today, a lot of these things are not reported, but they're still being done. And so, as disgusting as it sounds, the laws needed to be given because people were doing these things.
Yeah.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
Go on, Rafa.
I was gonna say in the Sifre, where it talks a lot about, where it delves deep into different halachot and midrash halachot. There, that the one pasuk that talks about the don't do the customs of Egypt. The rabbis go very deep, into what the customs and the laws and the ways of Egypt was. And I would invite anyone to go and read it because you see that, the Sifrei, that was a text that, traditionally we believe is, preserved from around the 400s, maybe even earlier. It started even earlier. And you see a lot of the things that they claim will break down society are happening today. And a lot of it had to do with the Arayot, but other things about, sexual immorality that isn't necessarily mentioned, like, for instance, and I don't want to get too explicit, but having relations in public, that's not something that's mentioned explicitly in the Torah, but we know, through derech that it's not, that's not right. It's not something you should do. But, you read the rabbinic text and it talks about, some of those, explicit content, having relations in public, what do you call it? Public display of affection, PDA and stuff like that. The rabbis talk about these things and how they'll break down society and morality and turn something holy, unholy. But I would invite anyone to delve deeper into that.
Yeah, what's interesting there is that what everyone needs to know is that what we're seeing today with the whole, the woke revolution and everything, and this whole conflict, this is an ancient conflict. There is nothing new about this. Absolutely nothing new. These conflicts have been going on for millennia. And we know how it turns out when you break down these barriers. We know. Just read history. And so what we're seeing today is something that has to be corrected. It's something that has to be battled, combated, because if not, we know how it's going to end up. It's already happened in the past.
Right.
Many.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, I want to touch on something we discussed last time, the balance between spiritual and practical. And Acharei reminds us that we need both. We need structure and spirit, ritual and reason. And that balance is what keeps us grounded and connected. Unfortunately, that's also all the time we have today, but what a meaningful discussion, and a huge thanks to everyone who contributed. This is exactly what Sephardic U is all about. And if you want to keep the conversation going, continue onto our webpage at sephardicu.com. Don't forget to follow us on all the socials or join our weekly readings. And until then, stay inspired, stay curious, and stay connected. And I wish you all Shavua Tov.